Hey everyone, my name is Gary, and welcome to Woodwind Doubling. Today, we're going to talk about embouchure. Today, we'll start with a general overview of the things that each instrument has in common regarding their embouchure. Then we'll get into some specifics that make each instrument's embouchure different. Embouchure is defined that the shape your mouth makes around the mouthpiece. So today, we're going to talk about everything that relates to making the most efficient shape possible for your embouchure, making the best tone possible. Let's get started talking about things that all of the horns have in common. First, as a rule of thumb, everything that we're doing is going to be relaxed and rounded. 5 things that we're going to talk about a lot today across the horns are muscles, tongue, lips, jaw, and teeth. Those are all things that are involved in making an effective and efficient embouchure. General rule involving air. The smaller the aperture you're making with your lips, the quicker the air is going to go. Science. The smaller the aperture, you're increasing the air speed. The larger the aperture, the air is slowing down. It's going to be less intense. General rule regarding your muscles, jaw, tongue, lips, and teeth, basically everything. You want to keep your embouchure stationary. This is going to allow you to produce a consistent tone, have consistent air usage, and allow you to play for longer. This next day update is brought to you by the letter T for tongue, because I did not mention tongues once after the introduction when I recorded the rest of this video yesterday. Anyway, our tongue position is going to be relatively consistent across all 3 horns. We're going to use what's called an elevated tongue position. The back of your tongue is going to be high and wide, anchored to your top molars. So your tongue is going to be anchored to the top molars in the back of your mouth. That's going to produce this relative shape, this being the back of your tongue and this being more the front of your tongue, the mouthpiece being about here. This is going to allow your air to be focused and allow for effective articulation. Here is a general visual of what I am talking about. There are a severe lack of tongue visuals out there in the world. That is an unseized opportunity. Let's get back to it. Flute is the exception here. For flute, you need to have absolute control over your air direction. So for flute, everything is going to be flexible and supple. The more flexible you can be and the more malleable you can be, your smaller aperture is going to be good for high and soft notes, and a larger aperture is going to be good for lower and louder notes. Okay, let's stick to flute now. Let's talk about the shape you're going to make with your mouth to play flute. I have here the head joint of my flute, and we're going to do an exercise with this in a second that you may have done with your students. For flute, number 1, you're going to bring the flute up to your lip line. Now, if you're not sure what I mean by lip line, when you lick your lips, it's where the wet meets the dry. The outer rim should be a little bit more elevated than the inner rim. When I say inner and outer rim, here's your tone hole. The inner rim is closer to your lip, and the outer rim, of course, is farther from your lip. So you bring the inner rim to your lip line. Everyone's going to be a little bit different, and that's okay. Your reflex is going to be to bring your lower lip in. I know as a saxophone player, I absolutely did that. Fight that urge. Bring your lower lip out. Your corners are going to come down. Not in a super exaggerated way, but your corners will be coming down. One of my flute teachers in the past referred to this as sad monkey face. If it works for you, go with it. Let's try this flute exercise now. I'm taking my head joint and I'm holding it in my left hand, and I'm covering the opening with my right hand. I'm going to bring the head joint to my lip line, and I'm going to play some long tones, and then I'm going to play some articulated notes. Again, lip line, where the wet meets the dry, right? Now I'm going to experiment with my airspeed and my aperture size to raise and lower the octave. This is another good exercise. Again, just the head joint. What we're doing here is we're keeping it simple. Keeping it simple. We're removing all the distractions that come with the rest of the flute, and we're just keeping it to the simple stuff. I have my students do this frequently. As a saxophone player, when I was first learning flute, this was my bread and butter at the beginning of every practice session. It is good for muscle memory, it's good for self-realization. It just lets you focus on the things that matter: tongue, lips, jaw, teeth, and muscles. General rules for flute. Your air speed: fast air speed, high and loud. Slow air speed, low and soft. General rules. Smaller aperture, which I said before, will increase the air speed because you're focusing the air. Larger aperture will slow the air down. Let's talk about coverage, because coverage is a complex idea on flute. Again, as a saxophone player, this was a very new idea to me. I've got a picture here of what the coverage should look like for your tone hole. Covering more of the tone hole will be good for higher and softer notes. Covering less of the tone hole will be good for lower and louder notes. Your aperture for flute is actually elliptical, which is this shape. Not so much round. Now, you can think round, I think round, but it's good to be aware that you're more so making the elliptical shape, not a perfect circle. And lastly, air direction. For flute, aiming your air higher will be good for higher and softer notes. Aiming your air a little bit lower will be good for lower and louder notes. These are minor, minute details. You're doing most of this with your lower lip. When you bring your lower lip out, the air is aimed more up. When you bring your lower lip in, the air moves down. The best way that I've ever had my students experiment with this is blowing a pinhole of air at the center of your hand and using your lower lip, aim the air up and down your palm, almost like target practice. Note for non-flute primary people, my saxophone players, clarinet players, oboe bassoon players, maybe you're a brass teacher watching this to get better for your woodwind students. I spend the most time playing flute. As a single reed primary, I spend the most time playing my flute. Let's talk about single reed instruments now, referring to clarinet and saxophone. They have a lot in common. So first we'll talk about what makes them similar, and then we'll talk about what makes them different. General principle: air goes in, reed vibrates, air continues through the horn, sound comes out. Someone in the audience right now is yelling at their phone or computer screen. Be aware, sound is coming out of any open hole on the instrument. Same goes for saxophone. Wherever a key is not pushed down, sound is coming out. But general principle, air goes in, sound comes out. The shape you're making for the single reed instrument, again, very similar clarinet to saxophone. Very minimal adjustment is required here. First, your lower lip is going to be about halfway down the reed, halfway down the reed. Your teeth, your top teeth, not your bottom teeth, will be about a quarter of the way down the mouthpiece. Your lower lip is going to be folded over your bottom teeth to cushion the reed. So we have our lower lip, my top teeth, and then your corners are going to seal in the air and wrap around the mouthpiece. Again, we come back to relaxed and round. Yes, your corners are going to seal in the air. I don't like the word tight for this. I like the word firm and secure. Firm and secure implies structure and stability. Tight just gives you all the wrong feels. So, again, lower lip over teeth, huh? Halfway up the reed or down the reed, whichever you want to think about it. Teeth on top, quarter of the way down, ish. Corners seal in the air. Not tight, firm, and stable. My chin should be pointing to the floor. This is for good posture and also keeps you more secure and stable. Good embouchure, good use of air, efficient use of air. Clarinet specifics. The angle of the clarinet should be about 30 to 40 degrees. This is the accepted way to play clarinet. It gives us the angle we need, it allows the air to enter the horn, and allows the reed to vibrate in the way that we need to make an appropriate tone. If you are trying to emulate Benny Goodman, then you may extend to 90 degrees. But for us normal folks here today, we're going to keep this to 30 or 40 degrees. And a cute angle for my math fans out there. It's worth noting that low clarinets and low saxophones will have a more relaxed version, more open version of these embouchures. Saxophone specifics. We are no longer going to need a 30 or 40 degree angle. The neck does the work for us. We are going to bring the sax to us, and air goes directly in. The embouchure is the same. My lower lip is over my bottom teeth. It goes about halfway down the reed. My upper teeth are about a quarter of the way down the mouthpiece. My corners seal in the air on the sides. I am not tight. I am firm and stable. Let's talk about squeaking. The following are reasons that you might be squeaking on your woodwind instrument. Your reed is too dry. Your reed is cracked. Your reed is not perfectly centered on the mouthpiece. The reed should be perfectly centered. Symmetry is our friend because math, it's everywhere. You might be applying too much pressure with your teeth or jaw. If you bite down, if you clamp down the mouthpiece, you will squeak. Tasty. You might be taking in too much mouthpiece. Remember, lower lip about halfway, upper teeth about a quarter of the way. Specifically on clarinet, you might also not be covering the holes completely. If you have younger students with growing hands, that will definitely be an issue in the younger grades, especially with the third finger for C right here. This is a bigger hole than the other ones. Same for these lower three down here. Holes not covered completely might cause squeaks. That wraps it up for us today. Today, we talked about embouchures for all horns. We talked about things they have in common. We talked about how to set up your mouth. We specifically talked about our muscles, our lip, our teeth, our jaw, and our tongue. Those are our focus areas when we're talking about embouchure. General rule of thumb, everything is round and relaxed. For further reading on woodwind instruments, I highly recommend Teaching Woodwinds by H. Gene Griswold. I'll put this in the credits. This is an amazing book that I reference all the time, teaching my own personal practice. It covers flute, clarinet, saxophone, oboe, bassoon, embouchure, fingerings, posture, practice habits, everything. It's a great book. I'll put this in the credits. Highly recommend to keep in your library. Thank you for listening to this today. Be safe and be well, everyone.